So I'd like to have all my panelists join us right now, and we have our two speakers, Matt Willett and Nate Arnold, who are from Biogen and from GE, and then I have three panelists that are going to be joining us, and it's Pete Duran, who's the vice president from Avid Solutions, and they're going to all introduce themselves in a minute. And Eric Barnstead, who's the principal software engineer lead from Microsoft, and Thomas Hod, who's the chief software expert from Siemens. And so these individuals will just tell you a little bit about themselves so that you can ask them some questions. And so I think we already have some questions, but I'll just let them to tell you who they are first. Okay. And then we'll get to the questions.
So Pete Duran with Avid, we helped Biogen with the projects that Matt went through, and happy to answer questions in a few minutes.
Okay, Thomas Hahn from Siemens. Maybe some additional words. First of all, classical automation company like NET. So somehow from the proceeding, let's say we have some kind of similar thinking and framework. Maybe the implementation is different, but that's a business. But when you're thinking about what my expertise is and what we are doing in the company, of course, Siemens from building technology, automation, power generation, mobility, healthcare. So we're covering different domains, and as a supplier of systems to our customer, as a supplier of service to our customer. Matt mentioned the example with the trains, similar one, okay. And on the other side as a user of, let's say, in the factories.
Okay.
And my expertise is really, and that's important, you mentioned this as a chief expert software in the IoT area. I'm involved in different initiatives. One is, let's say, OPC Foundation, where we're speaking about an IoT protocol, how you can use this in different domains, how you bring the IT and OT together. And on the other side is I'm involved also in some kind of initiative from government, from industry association, how IT and OT bringing together, touching the aspects like technology trends, business trends, skills, people, and culture.
Okay. Eric?
Hi, my name is Eric Barnstead. I run the Azure Industrial IoT team at Microsoft. I'm an engineer, an IT guy. I'm also involved, like Thomas, in the OPC Foundation. I'm also involved in some of the initiatives in Germany around IT and OT conversion or transformation, and I help customers on a daily basis with their digital transformation story and timeline.
Okay. So I think we have you met our speakers, so I think we have some questions in the back, and please state your name and your company. That would be helpful. And then use the microphone. We ask that because we're video recording the session.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
So my name is Ian Buchanan. I'm with Husky Energy. We're an oil company up in Calgary, Canada. And we use a lot of the same tools that Matt uses, actually. I was excited to see. We use Delta V, OSI Pi. We have XHQ from Siemens as our data visualization layer. And as we execute these projects, we're trying to use business data in our operation. We find that these projects end up being much more costly than we thought when we first go in. We start with data architects, and then we don't have the right data architect, and then these project managers, and then we have to do testing before it goes live. We're starting to use the Azure cloud to fail quickly rather than these big projects. But one of the things we're struggling with right now is, do we need a separate IT-OT group, or do you think it's still possible to continue this kludge, I call it, between IT trying to collaborate with OT? I noticed you talked about cross-training. Is that the key? We've tried that. It's not working as well as I'd like. I just wondered if any of you have experience with a separate group that kind of works in between.
Okay.
I'll go first. So we're kind of, like you, in the same position. We're sort of just starting that convergence process. We haven't really got far enough to really make that determination ourselves yet. The whole cross-training effort, I think it's about, getting the groups together. And there was a good sat in a session yesterday where someone had talked about in the audience about getting both groups. It was like 5 times a year to kind of sit and play hands-on, like a week-long training session type thing. And that's something that kind of stuck in my head as something I'd try out. Maybe not just one method. There might be other methods that might work better depending on the company. But you know, we're probably not quite ready to call it quits on the cross training part yet. I would say so. You know, we're gonna try and continue to see where that goes.
Okay, Pete, you worked with the Biogen folks, so maybe you can comment a little bit more on that.
Yeah, this might be an obvious plug for what we do here, but that's in a sense what we try to bring to the table. So at Avid, we recognized a few years ago that this IoT, IT convergence was about to happen. So we have the advantage, and Matt and I have talked a lot about this with his projects, is that our team has to stay abreast of the technology, whether it's cybersecurity, process improvement, you know, historization, data management, data analytics, and performance. So we've actually built out a separate IT team inside of our own OT company. And they work together, they collaborate together, and very often, in fact, in most cases now, we bring both to bear at every one of our clients. So when we sit down with a customer, we sit down with an IT person and an OT person in every project, in every discussion, so that we're understanding where, you know, in fact, as Matt mentioned, handing the data up from OT all the way up to the ERP system.
It just feels like there's more people. Like you just said, you got to have an IT person, an OT person, and now I've brought you in the middle.
Yeah, well,
I'm seeing my costs go up as you talk.
That's how I feed my kids, but yeah, I mean,
I know.
in a sense, but where actually you'll see the where it becomes a little more efficient is once we sit down with Matt's team, we understand what the business requirements are. That's where we start. I mean, I think Nate made a good job of saying what is it that we need to do, and then we can do a lot of the work offline while Matt still runs his factory. That's where the advantage is. We're working offline because Matt doesn't have the resources we do to bring all that information to bear. So then we handle the coordination between IT and OT and make a lot of those handoffs. And very often it's very much driven by business requirements. It's not driven by the technology. So I think that's really what the objective is. And you may have those resources internally, or you may not. I don't know.
Okay, does somebody else want to comment?
Yeah, maybe I add some perspective, not explaining you some examples which everybody in the company is doing, but maybe what we are doing, let's say, on an initiative level. I mentioned briefly before, I'm involved in Industry 4.0 initiatives. You can name it IT-OT Convergence, you can name it IoT, you can name it's all the same. But what the lessons I have learned out of this, and you're asking different teams and so on, we make it on the contrary. So we have looked inside that we bring together in teams different people from different companies. So example, Microsoft is involved, telecommunication company is involved, SAP is involved when you're speaking about ERP, Siemens is involved, GE is involved. So we brought different people together to look how we can address these IT-OT challenges which we have in front of us. First issue. Second issue is, let's say, we brought all the other people inside, in this case from the research part, that's obvious, but also, Nat mentioned before, people first, I think was your message. We brought inside also, for example, representatives from Workers' Council inside, because they will also some influence on the working environment. And meaning we brought different stakeholders together to address this problem, let's say on a strategic way, on an initiative. But when you're now going implementation, for example, in the company, we do it in a similar way. We bring the right people together. Of course, you have some investment at the beginning, what you mentioned, but nevertheless, you get more efficiency out of the production plant, or efficiency out at the customer side where a solution is used. So let's say, I think we have to bring these people, different skills together to look at these challenges, because nobody can do it alone.
Okay, I don't know, Eric, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I mean, apart from what Thomas just said about platform initiatives and reference architectures, which is super critical, right? Any company can make up their own idea and their own plans on how to meet that challenge. And what Microsoft is doing as a platform, IoT platform provider is partnerships. So we know we're not OT experts, but we partner with OT experts like Siemens and GE, because then we can build a combined product that doesn't cost an arm a leg.
Thank you.
Okay, Nate, you had an interesting perspective, I think, from the IT side.
I was gonna let the question. No. So, I think it's just the right people and its proximity. So I would, don't be afraid to critically evaluate your talent if you don't feel the IT and OT capabilities are where they need to be, then you need to get them there. And we found a real difference when we combine that with proximity. So typically you have enterprise IT, maybe in a headquarters facility or in a building or an office. They're not sitting in the factory every day. They're not walking through the factory in the morning and going into an office in the middle of the shop floor and understanding what's going on. So we put all of our really tactical IT teams that were driving the initiatives with the OT teams in the factory. And that really changed the mindset and the culture of how to deliver. And you have to break down some systems and structures, right? So if you've got some resistant systems and structures that are forcing you to align to metrics that don't drive what you're trying to drive with the convergence, then you need to attack that as a leader or get your leaders involved to break those barriers down so your teams can execute.
Good advice, thanks.
Okay, so do we have another question? Yes, we do, right over here. Okay.
Yeah, this is following the previous topic. It seems like there is a need for higher skill level at the plant level, not just operator, but in terms of IT. If we think in past years or 10 years ago, someone imagined an iPhone today and everybody knows how to use, even the kids. So it seems like there is a good opportunity to increase training and raise the skill level at the plant. The GE, for example, you look for more creative minds. Did you have a chance to evaluate that?
Yeah,
Nate? Yeah.
so certainly kind of ongoing evaluation, and it changed our HR policies relative to that model. So fortunately, we were in a non-union environment, so that helps. Obviously, there's some constraints if you have different environments like that. But again, it kind of goes to the systems and structures. If everyone in the plan isn't aligned to this new objective, right, and understand the value of doing this process, even to the HR practice teams, and I know everyone says even just the IT team or even the legal team or even sourcing or HR, all the support functions that are typically kind of behind the curtain have to get out from behind the curtain and have to be actively involved. And so we, in addition to the hiring practice changes, there are disciplinary changes and evaluation changes that went along with that to ensure that we were continuing to incentivize that type of activity in the shop floor. And then I think that, starting with operators, caused us to rethink incentive opportunities for up the chain to our exempt IT and OT experts as well, to align more to those objectives. So I think you have to think critically about how you evaluate success.
What we have done or also doing in the activities is precisely that similar. We looked at what are the competences we need for this IT-OT convergence. So let's say what is needed. Then we mapped this to the different disciplines, workers on a shop floor level, in the business administration, in the research and development department, finance department. And then we set up, let's say, a plan how to train the people which are, let's say, inside, still working or working at the moment and working, so we have to retrain them. And also looking what is needed when you're going to the university, when you're speaking about data scientists, what to set up. And in this case, we swapped this knowledge which we have, and I can tell you it's similar in every company. They have doing this several similar exercise, but then we swapped this outside to the government and telling them, look, we need for, at the university, training programs. Look, industry association, please set up training programs, retraining programs for the people on the shop floor level, what they have to do. Look, dear research institute, please prepare some training tables that we can use it. So, meaning you have to look what is needed, what are the competencies, and of course, then you have to make a straightforward and an implementation plan on the different level. And my feeling is always we should not forget the retraining, or the training is the people. It's not always about the people who are coming from the university, high school, or something else, but we have to look at what's also us involving when the people are, let's say, in the company, how we can retrain and prepare them for the future. So we have the different aspects besides the competences.
Pete?
One of the challenges we've seen is, you talked about location. So it's hard to get a recent college graduate who has job opportunities at Cisco or Google or Microsoft or anywhere to work in a paper mill or a manufacturing plant 200 miles outside of a major city.
To Grove City, Pennsylvania, yeah. It's very challenging.
Right, so we've recognized that. That's why we cross-train all of our IT and OT engineers the same. And having the ability for us to stay current in technology means we can deploy them in places where people's talent is aging out and is not being replaced by engineering talent that has IT and OT experience. So, and very often we're supplementing our clients' engineering teams. We become part of them, become embedded in their processes. Matt has the privilege of working in Raleigh, which is a pretty cool town, but it might be more difficult for Matt to work, you know, in upstate New York in the middle of winter in a plant where he has no family or friends. So, and quite frankly, that's where a lot of manufacturing facilities are. So, you know, I think you've got to think about how you augment your team, how you do the training, how you bring in resources to help them. And that's most organizations have some philosophy of insourcing and outsourcing almost every department. And I think that's where you've got to consider where your talent is. Training's important, but where are you getting these people? Working with universities, we just formed a partnership with Auburn to cross-train their engineering talent coming out of school on both IT and OT and heavy in the process as well.
Okay, all right. Is there another question here? Oh, we do have one right here.
Bob Vavra with Plant Engineering Magazine. When we started writing about this topic, the first thing we talked about was change management. And I want to go back to what Matt was talking about, the sharing of the success within the organization, not just even between IT and OT, but all the way through the business group, so that everybody understands what this is going on. But it also seems that a lot of the issues that we're talking about is that not everybody understands their piece in the overall business structure. The ability to get product from the front door to the back door is operations job, but they don't necessarily see that, how that impacts the business. Have you had to do a lot of culture change throughout the organization to get the entire group from the C-suite down aligned with this kind of structure? Because we've seen silos for decades, and it's just now we're starting to talk about breaking those down.
Okay, why don't we start with Nate? Do you want to answer that, or Matt?
Yeah, and those are you said the two key words that they like to use, culture and silos. Yeah, that seems to be pretty common in a lot of businesses. It is a culture change. I mean, you're talking about two, you know, completely different sides that don't usually interact, and it's not just at one site. You know, it's especially if you have sites across the globe. It's different in other countries as well. So I mean that's a key, but it's got to come from, you know, from the top down, I think, and you have to use, you know, from my perspective as an engineer, use your engineers as kind of your SMEs, but it still has to come from like that top-down level to create those programs that'll, you know, lead to success, not just for my unit, you know, my specific area, but through, you know, any site throughout Biogen.
I think the one follow on example is not just IT/OT, but in the early days of the factory, in my example, I would sit on an operating call. I had the pleasure of reporting to two vice presidents, the services vice president, supply chain vice president. And I'd sit on a call with the supply chain vice president, and they would say that we're junkyard dogs. We find used stuff. We find anything we can to save money to populate this factory. And I get the next hour on a call with the vice president of services. I want this to be a palace. This should be our shining star. We want to bring customers here, right? So that misalignment drove chaos, right? But so I think in addition to the strategies we're talking about aligning really the IT and OT and the folks that are making things happen in the factory, there needs to be just as much focus on strategic thought leadership within the CIO department, within the supply chain teams, and at the C-suite to drive out that disconnect and think about how are we spending the company's money for what purpose, and rationalize at that level. And it's easy to say that, but it's really hard, and it gets down to how you're measuring people quarter to quarter, month to month, year to year. you've got to have, your enterprise has to consider changing their objectives, metrics, KPIs, incentive programs if they're serious about making this transformation happen.
Anybody else want to comment, or?
Yeah, you mentioned it. You have to come top down. You have to go across the silos. You have to have some kind of strategy what you want to achieve, and then you have to push it across the silos with implementing the right culture. I think that's very, very important in the company, in the total environment for the different function which you have to serve.
Yeah, I mean,
Eric?
This problem is not an IT/OT problem, right? I mean, even within Microsoft, I mean, look at the cultural changes Microsoft went through in the last couple of years and how we managed to turn around. Because, I mean, you know, if you have internal silos that, you know, prevent communication and prevent shared goals, you're not going to succeed.
I think Nate's example, if you're looking for something crisp to take away, I think Nate gave probably two of the best examples you could have, which is put the developers and the IT people in the control room. What information does that operator need to be more successful at their job? And that changes the way you deliver a solution to your company. I think anybody could walk out of the room and do that. Collating their offices together. It breaks down those walls and those barriers. It's about culture. Those two things can be done without any capital, without any change in culture. It's just a simple reassignment. You know, Matt talked about sitting down with the IT team and identifying what they needed to do together and then cross-training. Hey, let me show you what's important in my world. And Matt wanted to know what's going on in the IT world. You know, no capital, no OpEx required to do either one of those things. If I'm looking for ways to do that, you can do that from the bottom up. While you still need top-down support, that's a great way to deliver a solution to upper management and say, look what we did here. And it, you know, 30% improvement in productivity, Matt, I mean, that's fantastic. So I think those are the key takeaways. I think Nate's examples are great.
Okay. Is there somebody else has a question here, too?
Hi, this is RMS from Equate Petrochemicals, Kuwait. I think Pete, you mentioned a right point, like new, fresh engineers graduating from IT graduates, they don't like to work in manufacturing facility. That's very true. But even the existing engineers who are in IT, in manufacturing facility, they prefer to work in regular IT compared to supporting control system network, because they feel the work what they do there is valued by their manager, like their managers well, as compared to the work they do for supporting the IT, because that is not well understood by the IT managers. Having said that, in our company we have a joint focus team with few engineers from IT and few engineers from control system, and this works out really well.
Very good.
We have dedicated focus team which takes care of all the network needs like patching, cyber security, whatever you name it. Okay, my question now is, we are talking about IT and OT convergence now. That is very relevant in the present architecture where we have a layered approach. We just heard about open process automation, right? Where it is going to be plug and play. We expect it to be plug and play, which very less amount of configuration works. So should we still talk about this convergence of IT and OT, or should we talk about enhancing the skills of OT personnel to do the minimal configuration on IT?
Okay, does anybody want to address that? Okay, so let Eric
I'll
start.
attempt an answer, right? So yeah, plug and play is important, and you know, you want to make connecting systems as easy as possible, right? So certainly you will need IT and OT skills to make that happen. And again, through partnerships, I mean, you can't expect either one to succeed without the other. Through partnerships, and that partnership can be across companies or within a company, you will be able to do that. And then you have a shared success. First of all, you have a shared goal, right? But then you can also share the success, and then the leadership team of that company or the companies involved will need to emphasize that message. This is what success looks like, so others can follow and repeat.
Maybe to add, and Eric said it before, you know, when I'm answering, I have not answering what is IT, what is OT. You have to do shared, so we have to combine it. And also your slide where you have this 5 options, I think, from IT to OT. I think it have to be done together. It have to be successful together. And when you have success, then you have also the momentum to proceed. And so it's a little bit, you have to bring the topics together. Of course, with a focus team, like you mentioned before, for example.
I agree, but there are still some issues like that. There's still some options like that that people use today. Not that it's the right way, but it's the way they do it, or the way they've always done it.
Just let me refine my question well. Like, I very well agree that it has to be joint effort. There's no doubt about that. But my question is, should OT personnel enhance their IT skills, or IT personnel come down to the OT level? Which do you feel as the most important factor here?
I think it's probably a little of both, but I think it's probably more important for the OT team to become more familiar with network architecture and design. I think one of the presentations I heard yesterday is a network's a network. OT is very different than IT, but I think you also have to focus on what are the impacts the business sees from both groups. For example, the more open automation becomes, the more vulnerable it also becomes. Right? So you have to be considerate there. One of the ways we look at it is if you've secured your house with ADT, very often your garage door is still wide open. That's the manufacturing OT department that people haven't typically thought about locking down. What we talk about with Matt from a security OT, IT perspective is I'm not worried about somebody hacking in and blowing up a boiler. I'm worried about somebody hacking in and tweaking a pressure or a temperature just enough to throw the batch off for 30 days and cost the company $125 million, right? IT is concerned about somebody hacking in and taking all the customer data or everything else, and could have a similar impact to the business on market share, market value, et cetera. So once you understand both of those situations, you can see that you got to come together. Right? When I'm laying out an OT infrastructure from a network design perspective, I've got to make sure that I've talked with IT and look at Matt said it perfectly, understanding network design helped him figure out how to do a better job on the OT side. So I think it's both, but I would tell you that at least our engineers, OT engineers are pretty smart people. They inherently think like engineers. They can pick up IT and network infrastructure. From an IT person to learn how to do process engineering or how to build a drug is a little bit of a different ask, right? Typically, sometimes an OT engineer is a chemical engineer. They learned automation or mechanical engineer.
So
Okay. You wanted to comment?
Yeah, maybe I'm trying to be too philosophical, but it's just a label for us to figure out how to apply the right resources, right? So I'd again go back to the systems and structures. If you're trying to differentiate between, do I invest in retraining OT or adding to my OT population or my IT population, typically you're talking about a CIO function and a supply chain function, and you're automatically going to, or what's my head count, what's my CMB restriction, what are my op plans, and if you're really going to be successful with whatever you're attempting to point them to solve, is pull that team out of those silos. And resource a team that's focused on the problem. And so I don't want to just say mission-based team to say it or agile or any of that stuff. It doesn't matter unless you're able to break through those kind of traditional barriers that limit your thinking to, I can only invest X amount of money in training, do I put it in supply chain or IT, then you're ultimately starving the real problem if you're able to kind of resource a separate team that kind of looks at that. So we try to pull that out separately and say, I've got a brilliant factory team. And I need certain skill sets and personnel on that team, and I'm going to invest an op plan in that team to solve this problem, and then I think you get through the gray areas of whether that's IT or OT.
The cross-training happens in and of itself.
Okay, is there another question? Well, I guess I have a question. So what do you think, you think it is going to be plug and play? You think that's the future, or do you think how do you think this is going to all play out? Does anybody want to talk about the convergence and is it going to go away, or what do you think? I'd like some opinions.
Well, I'm hopeful that it will be plug and play. Yeah, we're working on that with a lot of emphasis, right? I mean, we want to make sure that it is just like plugging in your USB printer eventually, but there's a lot of work to do, and it won't succeed unless you have the combined skill set and knowledge of both IT and OT working on that problem.
And maybe from the perspective of the OPC Foundation, that's exactly what we are trying to achieve together. So we are both inside. So you see also this OT-IT convergence, however you in persons, breaking the silos, however you name this. But let's say we have to face the plug-and-play topics. We have to develop the right technology with the connectivity, with the secure connectivity. I think you mentioned before with real-time and the difference between IT and OT. Of course, in the OT environment, we have to make it secure. And with this, of course, you're speaking about protocols. You're speaking about description of machine, you're speaking about semantics, ontologies, and so on. But this is the technical topics which we have to achieve together.
Okay. I think, you want to comment? Somebody else?
No, I just.
All right, we have another question back here, too.
Well, this is more of a comment to reinforce what Eric just said. There are companies, including ours, that are working with Microsoft on this plug-and-play concept, which really comes down to loading firmware on chips on the assets that you have in your plant that will not only handle IoT information, but it'll also create a direct connection to like an Azure cloud, as an example, where you can access the analytics and everything. So it's coming, but it's probably a 4 to 5 year process to get to that point, because we not only have to enable the technology, we also have to then get the asset manufacturers to install that technology in their products.
Yes, and you have to do it because the system is typically running. You have not to influence the production process. And the other issue is, a lot of the systems are brownfields are installed, which you have to want to get some benefit out of the system to improve the efficiency of the plant. So you have to think about also how you can reinstall this without influencing the production process, let's say, in a brownfield environment. But this is a topic where, let's say, we take the IT guys and tell them what to do. Sorry.
Exactly, yeah. So just to comment on that, so it won't work unless we work on it together, and I think open standards like OPCOA is the right approach, right? We can't build custom solutions, all of us. We need to focus on open standards, on common architectures, and then build plug and play into those open standards. And get support from governments, and we are, right? Like the initiatives that were discussed today or discussed in the last couple of days. Because then really, when the direction is clear, then you can start solving the technical problems together.
So I'll raise it up a level since that's my theme today, but if you think about where we see manufacturing going as GE, there's a tremendous demand for flexibility, greater flexibility, and there's a tremendous demand for greater efficiency. We just have to see it. We're not going to have the type of footprints that we had in the past. We're not going to have isolated operations in factories. There's a desire to combine operations. There's a lot of innovation and automation and advanced manufacturing. We're investing heavily in additive, which is changing completely how we think about designing products and delivering products. So what that means to me in my world is I have to help our factories become the best factories or they're not going to survive. And so there's a forcing function for them to, they maybe pushed off a 2% yield increase in years past because, oh, that's too difficult and the returns aren't that great. And now they're aggressively pursuing 2% yield improvements, right? So I'm driven, I'm demanded by the manufacturing teams to get more and more sophisticated, which drives all of this discussion of how do we do that, how do we reuse, how do we go faster?
Yeah, I mean, if you look inside Matt's plant, you've got Delta V, you've got Siemens, you've got Rockwell, you've got many different companies' technologies. So you have to have that interoperability to be successful to get the data into the cloud where it ultimately needs to reside, for actionable intelligence.
And Matt, you mentioned really a very important point, because we are driven, let's say, from efficiency, productivity, increase of quality, flexibility. That's for, let's say, the user demands or our demands when we have things in our factory, and we have to apply then the digitalization in the appropriate way. And the digitalization with the discussed topics, which give us also the possibility to do this. Of course, we have the OT constraints, like also discussed before.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay. I guess what I'd like to do is have each person on the panel just give some closing remarks, maybe some thoughts that they had while they were, even things they didn't think of while they were doing their presentation, or the panelists. And I think we had a terrific group here, by the way. So could you start with Nate? Yeah.
Sure. So I'll just reinforce some key points. I think you've got to iterate towards outcomes if you're starting the journey, prove the business value, really try to push your organizations, challenge the systems and structures to understand the objective that is really going to matter for your operation in the context of the business, because attacking those silos will help you be more successful. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be about, you're eventually going to be demanded, if you're not already in your industry, to become more efficient, to drive better output. And so it's inevitable that we're heading down this path. It's just up to us to accelerate the progress there with some smart solutioning.
Matt?
Yeah, so as an engineer, if you can give me anything that is truly plug and play. I maybe I haven't been doing this that long, but real plug and play, yeah, that's that'll get an engineer's eyes perked open pretty wide. But going back to the point, yeah, the really just taking the small successes you have with something like Convergence, anything really, in making that visible in your entire company to kind of start that process of creating a top-down strategy, I think is the key. You don't want it to stall out, but that's where the success will start.
Okay. Eric?
So I would say get involved, right? Get involved in open standards, get involved in standard organizations. I've seen that personally as a huge success. Like the OPC Foundation, like OPA, that's the right approach, but we need you to participate, to get your point of view, and to, create better reference architectures and better standards that include plug and play.
Thomas?
Maybe you have really to start what you want to achieve, efficiency and so on. Then you have to look what technical trend supports this. Look what is a business. Do not underestimate the topics around culture, training, and so on that you build up. Let's say also organization, what we discussed, and then somehow do it together. And open standards. It's one topic which we can do really together.
And Pete?
I think in 5 years, although this is automation, maybe 10 years, we won't be having this discussion. I think business and technology trends are going to pull, as Nate said, this all together. You won't see OT or IT, you just might see the term BT, business technology, and there's components to every aspect of it. So if you're doing this right and focusing on outcomes and you cross-pollinate teams together, you just have, you have a team trying to drive business initiatives. And I think we won't be having meetings about this topic in 5 years.
Okay, well, I'd just like to thank everybody again. I thank Matt and also for Biogen, for the company allowing them the time. I'd like to thank Nate Arnold and also for GE allowing him the time. And also our panelists who are real world-class panelists, as you could see, from Pete Duran from Avid Solutions and Eric Barnstead from Microsoft and Thomas Hahn from Siemens. So let's give them a round of applause because I think they did a tremendous job. And I'd like to thank you guys too, because you're a great audience. You stayed with us. And so again, we had a very high quality audience, and thank you very much. And if someone's interested in speaking next year, let us know. And if you want to talk to these guys, I'm sure you could exchange business cards and ask them some more questions as well. Thank you. And there's boxed lunches. There should be boxed lunches outside. So if you take one to the airport, make sure you take your liquids out.